Hi everybody, this is going to be a narrated tutorial on how to draw Joker. I'm going to be focusing on his face and makeup. If you want to see the whole thing with the background and his clothes, there is a time-lapse and the link will be in the description. My first challenge here was the hair. It seemed to be of various colors, with the green being the most dominant. It was a kind of a yellowish green with some highlights, so I wasn't really sure what to start with, and I picked an olive green. So I'm going to use the olive green to be my base color for his hair, and I'm going to be combining it mostly with brown. And then I'm going to try to draw some highlights with an eraser. You can see that I occasionally use a Q-tip to blend. Colored pencils don't really blend that great, but some of the brands that I use, like Staedtler for example, they are a little bit easier to erase and they're a little bit easier to blend, but their colors aren't as rich. Right now I'm working with a Faber-Castell Van Dyke Brown, which is a very rich brown and much darker. So I'm using that for the darker areas, which are going to be around his roots. And the highlights, as you can see, will mostly be green. Now, as you can see, I'm drawing in between these strands of hair, trying to suggest some kind of a structure, because I want to have some parts of the hair overlapping so that I can create the illusion of thickness and depth. You can see that I used a little bit of ochre and pink for his scalp there. So I'm also using a black colored pencil to draw in some of these darker areas in between the hair. And like I said, my goal will be to make the hair overlap here and there, which is not going to be easy because colored pencils are not very easy to erase, but I'm trying not to press too hard. So now you can see me going in with a pencil eraser and drawing some of these highlights to make it look like some of the hair is in front of the other parts of it. This lower area closer to the neck is going to be darker, and the upper parts of the hair are going to be lighter. So, like I said, I'm mostly working with the brown closer to the scalp, closer to his face, and I'm doing the highlights mostly with the green and then with an eraser. But the roots need to be darker. You can see that I've achieved a pretty realistic look here, and I went over it a little bit with white colored pencil to soften it and blend it in a little bit. So I'm just using the Van Dyke Brown again, shading the roots and trying to create structure and layers. Doing the same thing on the right side that I did on the left. I go in with the black colored pencil to fill in some of these darkest areas. The idea is to make his hair look kind of messy and lanky and kind of greasy. Again, trying to pull these highlights with the pencil eraser where I can. Although, like I said, erasing color pencils is not that easy. And as usual, I grab a lighter colored pencil to blend or burnish what I drew a little bit to make it look softer. I'm also adding a touch of yellow here and there because initially I did think that his hair was a little bit more yellowish. So I was counting on adding that a little bit later. But I think the olive green that I picked initially did a very good job. It's really hard to get the exact same colors. But I think this combination of Van Dyke brown and olive green with some highlights drawn with an eraser did a pretty good job. By the way, as you probably know, the actor who played the Joker here was Heath Ledger. This was one of his last roles. He was a very good actor, but he died very young. Now moving on to the eyes and the face. And as you can see, I'm going to be using a combination of colored pencils and pastel pencils. I'm drawing the eyes with a combination of black and brown, and I'm doing that with a colored pencil because I need a little bit more precision. Now I'm using black pastel. These are woodless pastels that I'm going to be using. Woodless pastel pencils. And the reason why I chose to use pastel pencils on his face was because his makeup is all smeared and muddy, and I thought that pastels, which are a lot easier to blend, would help me create that effect a lot easier, and it'll turn out that I was right. But I do go over all of these areas with colored pencils, with a black colored pencil and a brown. This is a lighter brown that I'm using now. I do go over these areas a little bit to refine some of the detail. I'm using a burnt sienna to draw some detail around the mouth, but I'm going to be using a red pastel pencil around the mouth as well, because the Joker has smeared red lipstick around the mouth. Now I'm trying to suggest some of his wrinkles, but as you can see, I've put down a little bit of white charcoal on his face. Even though the paper is already white, I want to put down some white charcoal because it's going to help me create the effect I want. which is this caked, spoiled makeup. It's going to help, the pastels and the charcoal are going to help me move that pigment around and make it look like his makeup is all smeared and messed up. You can see that I'm doing some of the final details on the hair and around the ear. The hair is pretty much done and I'm happy with the way it looks. I may be going to be going in with a little bit of black colored pencil here and there to darken some of the areas, but that's mostly it for the hair. And now I'm working on the face. I'm going to be using this light brown for now to shade the sides of the face to give the face volume and shape. And I'm going to be using a variety of other colors to create a realistic appearance of whatever is visible of his skin underneath all that makeup. And then using the brush to blend it out, and then adding some more pastel on top to make it look like matte makeup. As you can see, I started drawing the mouth with a little bit of colored pencil, and I'm using a combination of ochre, brown, and some other colors for the skin tones, and a little bit of the darker brown for the area under the chin and on the sides of the head. Now I grabbed this red pastel pencil that I was talking about. These are all woodless pastel pencils. So I grabbed a couple of these red pastel pencils and I'm drawing the makeup, the lipstick around the mouth, and I'm really being careless about it because that's the way I want it to look. I need to go along these lines which represent his scars, so I'm trying to create some wrinkles there around the mouth, and I'm going to be adding more value and more color to this eventually as well. I'm also drawing some of the detail with a darker colored pencil, which is burnt sienna here. So now I think when you look at the area around the mouth and around the cheeks, you can see why I used a combination of pastels and colored pencils. I wanted this smeared look, and I think this would have been way more difficult to achieve using just colored pencils. This process actually didn't take that long. I'm not playing it in real time because obviously my drawings are pretty detailed and real-time tutorials would take hours, but I can tell you that this didn't take very long. Now I'm drawing some of these wrinkles, and I'm using a pencil eraser to draw over and at the same time remove some of the white charcoal that I put down on his forehead. Now I need to work around the eyes, and I'm smearing this white color, but then going back in with colored pencils and adding some more detail. The idea with the white paint, with the white makeup that he's wearing, is to make it look like it dried and broke around the area where his wrinkles are. And the idea with the mouth is to make the areas where the scars would be a lot darker and to make the rest of it messy and red. So like I said, Heath Ledger was a pretty good actor, mostly known for, I guess, for the teenage comedy 10 Things I Hate About You. He was also in Mel Gibson's Patriot movie. My favorite movie of his probably is not Batman Dark Knight, but The Night Tale, I believe it was called. It was set in the Middle Ages, or the late Middle Ages. And because I studied English language and literature and history, that was the material that I was familiar with and interested in. There are some things that I didn't like about the movie, but overall it was a pretty good, entertaining movie, and like I said, he was always a very good actor. Some people say that his Joker was the best Joker. I'm not really sure about that. He did a great job, that's for sure. But I thought that Jack Nicholson was also pretty good. I'm working on the other eye. As you can see, I put down a little bit more of that black pastel on the left one, but now I'm working on the right one. Repeating the same process. The pastel, which can be smudged and blended easily, works for me here because I can achieve certain effects without much effort. But I do need to add some detail and refine the shape with the color pencil. I believe this is one of the better color pencil drawings I did because I don't usually work with colored pencils and I'm not an expert on colors, but I think I used quite a few colors when creating this drawing. I kept using this light brown to shade his face to go over the white areas, because if I didn't do that, the face would look flat, and it would also lack detail and texture. So you can't just leave it white. I have to shade it properly, and I really did my best to shade his face to make sure that it has volume, that it has shape, and also to create likeness to make him really look like Heath Ledger. Well, Heath Ledger under all this makeup. Now I grabbed a little bit of this cobalt blue. Actually, I'm not sure which color this was. This wasn't a Staedtler pencil. It was a deep dark blue that I used to add a touch of color to these shadows and to these darker areas. But I think it was the equivalent of cobalt blue. I'm not really sure. I just grabbed whatever felt right at the time. I use several brands of pencils, of color pencils. I mostly use Faber-Castell and Staedtler, but I do have other cheaper brands. Like I said, I find that more expensive color pencils aren't always necessarily better, because the cheaper ones sometimes have some advantages because they have less pigment. They can be a little bit easier to blend and a little bit easier to erase, or so it seems to me. But adding a few touches of blue here and there, I think, improved the appearance of his makeup and made it look a little more realistic. As you can see, I'm adding some more darker areas to the hair, which I said that I would do, even though I'm mostly done with the hair. And now I need to shade the neck, and I'm mostly going to be using a brown to do that. And then using burnt sienna to add some more of these deep and dark red details. Like I said, this part of the tutorial is going to focus on his face and makeup. That's all I wanted to show you. But if you want to see the whole thing, I have a time lapse. This was a commission drawing I did for an old customer. And I think I did pretty good, considering the fact that I don't really draw color pencil with a color pencil that often, but maybe I should. Anyway, once I'm done with the face and the hair, I also had the background, which was a prison wall with bricks, and of course his weird clothes, which was very colorful, but you can see all of that in the time lapse. Now just adding a few final details around the eyes with a black colored pencil to refine these wrinkles, make them more pronounced, and adding some of these darker areas in the hair. And I need to clean up some of these edges a little bit before I move on to the next stage. And the next stage, of course, will be drawing his clothes, and then the background with a brick wall. That's all I wanted to show you for now. Thank you for watching.